it is so sorry.
Hi, welcome to Ragtag, the place for bites and banter. My name is Victoria, I'm a solutions engineer.
I'm Saloni, software developer.
And I'm Natasha, a software engineer as well.
So in today's episode, we'll be talking about interview prep, resume tips, and basically preparation for anyone who's like starting a career in tech. So maybe we can start with the both of you, alright?
What do we think about it?
Yeah, what do you think about interview prep in general? And like, you know how in software engineers there's like a huge competition for like, you know, data structures and algorithms and all that. Like, how do you usually advise people to prep their interviews for their career? Yeah.
Maybe I can start with like how I do it, maybe.
Yeah. In fact, like maybe you should talk about how you actually have a series, and that's why like I feel like you're the most qualified person to speak in this like room. So you want to talk a bit about that and how you've been helping others like prepare as well.
Okay, so how it all starts is basically for a software developer, interviewing is like a big thing. I feel like there are like 5 rounds in most companies, and so there's like the live coding round.
Yeah.
So that might be online where you have to answer data structures and algorithms question. And then there will be a system design round. So as you get a bit more senior, there is the system design, or there's the API design round for a more junior role. There might be like a behavioral round and some other cultural rounds and things like that. So there are these rounds. It is very difficult, in my opinion, to prepare for these because you don't actually do these data structure algorithm questions in your day-to-day job. So you actually have to sit down on like this website. I use LeetCode, but there's like HackerRank and
HackerRank, yeah.
Yeah. So you can prepare for questions on these, but preparing is like basically relearning your whole university, not your whole university, but a lot of your university topics.
Yeah, it's very textbook, right?
I feel like it'll take like 3 months for me to, for example, if I've not done an interview in a long time, it'll take 3 months for me to prepare for the data structures and algorithm round for any bigger company. And it's a whole process. So what I usually do is I try to be consistent with it. So always be interview ready, basically. And you know how the job market is. Tech layoffs are going left, right, center, everywhere. So it's better to be interview ready. And how you do that is basically, how I do that is, because I run a community, I can do it. So I actually do like monthly sessions. So monthly sessions on like one question at a time or one system design topic at a time, where I will be interviewed, or I'll interview one of my friends, and we'll just discuss around those topics. And that's how we keep updated with the latest questions and be prepared with all the algorithms out there. And yeah, so it makes it a bit easier. So when you're not pressured to go find for a job, just on your normal day-to-day life, you're prepared already, so that when you do get laid off, you will still have to practice a bit more, but at least you're already like halfway there.
Right.
In that
you don't
sense.
have to like start from scratch.
Yeah, so that's my thinking overall for software developer interview prep. But of course there's other parts of it, like your resume has to be updated, LinkedIn and things like that. So that's how my thinking is for software.
I actually love that philosophy, like always be interview ready.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what happens.
Exactly.
Like the same thing for resume actually. I always tell my readers your resume has always to be interview ready, kind of like ready for submission.
Yeah.
I did write an article before on like, you know, how to structure a good resume. There's a difference between good and wow resumes. So I always like kind of show tips on how to have a wow resume, and one of those tips is actually to always keep it as up to date as possible. So definitely in line with your philosophy. I was wondering if Natasha, do you have anything?
Like actually I didn't realize that, but I also kind of had the same mindset, but less so of like really intentionally telling yourself I have to be interview ready at all times, but to make sure that like your day-to-day software or like your day-to-day work practices are kind of geared towards like different aspects of an interview. I think one of the tips that people I always give to people when they ask me is really to be comfortable with vocalizing exactly what's in your mind. And I think a lot of people don't start off with that, but this is something you can train on an everyday basis, i.e. engage in paired programming. Like, and when you're doing pair programming, don't just like sit there and then just kind of like wait for questions to be asked to you by your partner. practice just like verbalizing everything and don't be ashamed of like being like, oh, I actually don't know this syntax. Like, yeah, you have to practice that as well, because I feel like that went really well for me at stages in life where I was interviewed, but I would say that I wouldn't have had enough time to say like practice my data structures and algorithms, to practice my system design questions. But because every day I'm already so used to like just literally brain dumping everything that's in my head, I felt like the interviewer could tell that I didn't prepare for like exactly the questions, but at the same time he knew exactly my thought process, because I would be like, oh, yeah, I kind of want to do this, but I kind of forgot like how to do it in this syntax. Right now I'm going, some of the like interviews are like open book as well, and they want to see like what you search up. I'm going to go on like the browser right now, and I think I'm going to like search this up because this is the exact thing that so just basically being comfortable with that, being also knowing like the terminologies that you're you use on an everyday basis to relay concepts to people, to relay your misunderstandings, and relay like your questions. And this also goes into like not just being comfortable verbalizing what's in your head as you work, but also the practice of like asking questions in work. If you already have that practice where whenever you hit into a roadblock, you immediately ask someone, you're constantly practicing already, verbalizing what's in your head, verbalizing your thought processes. So that's kind of like actually in line with this whole philosophy of always being interview ready. It doesn't have to be a very conscious thing. In fact, like once you start off, it becomes very subconscious. Yeah. And I think that like, with all of that wrapped up, you have your resume ready, you're always like practicing with a friend, and also practicing, not really practicing data structures and algorithms every day. Like I think I would die like if I did that. No, that'd be so boring. But and also like just in your everyday work, knowing how to verbalize your thought processes and being very unashamed about it. I think that combined already, you could be ready for an interview the next day, and you'll feel like really like relaxed.
So natural at it. Yeah. So what I actually like about what you mentioned as well, verbalizing the concept, like practicing it. I think a lot of people, they focus on just deepening their knowledge and focusing on training like how to code, like essentially. But in tech interviews, we often see that they also test your communication skills. And that is something people don't train enough, I guess.
Exactly.
Right? And that's why we say about like mock interviews, pair programming. These are all essential because you're actually practicing how to communicate to other people. So just by verbalizing your thoughts and your how you code, your thought processes, that actually kind of trains you, and you're actually preparing for the interview. So I really like what you mentioned about just verbalizing it out. That actually, like the examiner, the interviewer, they're actually kind of like looking whether or not you can communicate that.
Exactly. It's also a big part of communication.
So like in a normal tech interview, they're not just looking at your solution, but how you communicate, because eventually, especially for bigger companies, you will be within a team, right? And they want to know how well you can articulate your solution, and how well you can discuss, and how well you can actually work in a team. So I think that is also one tip that would like to share with a lot of people, is the communication skills part.
Exactly. And as you talk about that, I wanted to throw something out. I just realized, like, especially with things like ChatGPT, GitHub Copilot, all these like AI-enabled like tools that basically replaces the mundane of I know like this stack in and out, and I know all the syntax. Like, you're basically weeding out like the people who already like know this. So beyond like just being able to do what ChatGPT, what GitHub Copilot can do, what can like interviewees and like people in tech offer to the table now? Like, what do you guys think?
Actually, when you start talking about ChatGPT, I thought you will be coming from an aspect that you should also be a good prompter.
Actually,
I use ChatGPT in my day-to-day coding job as well. So to be able to articulate to ChatGPT, this is what I want. Can you write a method that can do this, and then write a test for it, or refactor this line of code? So you should be able to know words like refactor firstly, like or what is a good refactoring, did it even do it properly, or like understand the nuances that it does, and to be able to tell it that what language, what principle you want to use. So that I think now the new age interviewing should also be looking out for
interesting.
You should be able to prompt
like, engineering,
because you'll be faster, right? Because GitHub Copilot, for example, you should be just able to write a command, write this method, and in like a second you already have a meta, whereas you spend 30 minutes to write this on your own. So that's also something. So you should be using it maybe. That
I
could be
love that as like a senior engineer you are saying this, because I think a lot of people are ashamed to admit that they rely heavily on GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT. But you're absolutely right, because like beyond like doing the mundane and a routine that like these services can already provide, it's about us and how we leverage on these tools to know exactly what to prompt. That's like, you know, they call it a prompt engineer, right? Like even as a software engineer, solutions engineer, you're a prompt engineer yourself. And I like that you say you're basically thinking that maybe more interviews should be going in that direction to see what people prompt.
Yeah.
I think that's another aspect.
It is the future of software development for sure.
Yes.
That AI will be helping you to code, and you will be a much faster developer. So you should be. I would actually look out for these kind of things. I don't know about if companies are already doing it, but I think that's where we should be going.
Agree.
It's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of, that you leverage on existing technologies to make yourself better.
Yeah, definitely.
I actually want to like bring about this new topic, which is, I always find like for software developers, I always have like two opinions about this. Like, why do we actually have to do those data structure and algorithm questions? Like, why are we going through this?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know we're gonna get into that very fast, but yes.
Okay,
I want to know your opinions. Like, what do you guys think about it?
I think it's unnecessary. Like, honestly, like, it's not unnecessary in that, like, nobody should know data structures and algorithms, but I think it's not necessary to test
by
it.
practicing, you can just do it.
Exactly.
But why do all of us have to do it?
I think like I really think it's more of like it's an easy thing to test. Like that's one. We have to acknowledge that in the job market, companies outsource the recruitment part, right? And when you outsource, I realize that a lot of recruiters, obviously they aren't engineers themselves, a majority of them, otherwise they would be like engineers. And the easy way around like testing, would be to look at what's already tested in school, right? Like for them to model those textbook answers and questions. And I feel like that as a basis, it's just more of like it's easy to test. Versus like system design questions, you actually have to think about and know the system design well as an interviewer, as somebody who crafts the questions. But as we're like interviewing so many people and hordes, and people are outsourcing recruitment to other agencies, I can see why the preference gears towards like easier to like test things. So that's one. And I think it's also like a weeder, like more of a weeder round for people who just like completely aren't able to understand these concepts. Perhaps I'm not saying that like I think this should be continue to be the way forward. I'm just saying like I acknowledge that why it's like this, but whether or not it's actually important to our jobs, I don't think it is. I feel like it's more of like when you hit a problem that requires you to go down to that low level, you naturally already have the resources to revisit those topics and see like what's important to that particular problem you're facing at hand in the job. Like for me, I actually never had a data structures and algorithms class at all. I never actually did like proper computer science or software engineering, and I knew I didn't want to. Basically, like when I went to college, I had the choice between going to Carnegie Mellon to pursue like straight up computer science and going to UCLA to do undeclared because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I picked UCLA because I was so afraid that going into like computer science as academia, like I would completely be disenchanted and not want to pursue this as a discipline. So for my 4 years in college, I continued software engineering on the side, like still, developing apps, but I never actually like, the data science, data structures and algorithms or whatever. It's only like I decided to give myself a shot for a master's, and I did a master's in computer information systems. And then like I did the necessary to like pass and waive off like the fundamental classes and stuff. But do I think like those actually like help me in my current job?
So I do resonate a lot with you. Just also partly I don't have formal education in CS. So when I was preparing for like an interview with a lot of tech companies, the first thing they're looking for, like you mentioned, is to weed out, is to filter the people who knows the concept and the people who don't. So naturally, I studied data structures and algorithms for like 10, 11 months. I studied it in great depth because I know that it's important for me to know this if I want to get a job in tech. Whether or not it's relevant, like in the day-to-day job, is debatable, but I do recognize it as a tool. So it's kind of like calculus in finance. It's like day-to-day job in finance, you won't need calculus, but when things come and like you want to like analyze certain trends or something, math is needed. So it's more like a tool. It's like in the back of your mind, you'll like immediately, oh, I actually know how to solve this problem because you already studied the concepts. So it's not as in like, oh, you like some people would ask, like people who never been in tech, do you actually use data structures and algorithms every day in coding? Of course my answer will be no. But it's very helpful to know if, like, let's say you have a problem and then you need a solution, what data structure am I gonna use to implement this? So in a way, knowing it is very useful, and I can see why interviews always have this question. It's so that they know that, and they are confident in hiring you, that these are the skills you have and these are the knowledge that you have. So we're confident about you, that you can solve problems, like if the situation comes when you need data structures and algorithms.
Yeah, essentially like a software developer's job is to solve problems, because there are problems. But so like in my journey, what I've realized, because every 2 years I do switch jobs, right? So I've done many interviews, and from that experience, I think like my conclusion of like these rounds is that I think it should not be the most biggest or like the deal breaker thing. Like I wouldn't ever like practice crazily and like be able to answer all questions. I will try to keep myself to a level where I can answer medium questions, not the really tough ones, like go crazy. So like able to answer medium questions, and what it helps me do, because I do interview prep on as a side thing also, right? So I actually think that it actually makes me feel smarter. Like I feel like I'm like oiling my engine.
What do you feel smarter?
Like it's like your day-to-day job, you're not really using that much of your brain sometimes, right? Sometimes it's like repeated routine work sometimes. Right. So when I do this interview prep on the side, it feels like I'm oiling my engines. So then when I go to work the next day after doing like two to three good questions the day before, I actually feel like, wait, my brain's working a lot more faster. It's like it's like engined, it's like oiled. It's like
that's good.
And then I actually start thinking a bit more about what I'm doing. Like actually, even though it's like you can use a set instead of like an array or like a list here, because you want unique items. You can actually you start thinking a little bit more about these nuances in your code. And data structures you do use every day, maybe not the algorithms, but it does come in handy. I feel at work it does make me think a bit more efficient wise as well, because there are 2 for loops that happens at work. So then I will think about, wait, if there are like 100,000 items coming in, which it does in the company I work for, because it's a bigger company. So then I will think about, I don't want to go through it 2 rounds of it. How can I make it better? So
okay, yeah, true. Okay,
so it does happen.
My words back.
It does make sense. I just don't believe in doing the hardcore, know how to answer all the hard questions, kind of like know the names of algorithms, things like that. You should be able to solve questions. It does show that you know how to solve questions. You are able to think in that in that mindset. So yes, you should be able to think in that mindset. It is a mindset, I think, the way of thinking.
It's a mindset paired with the knowledge.
Correct. Yeah, you should know when to tap what and solve this question in that manner.
Perhaps what we're trying to gear towards is that we're not saying that data structures and algorithms are not important. In fact, they're the fundamental basis, and we do use it every single day. But it's just that the way it's being tested as like pure data structures and algorithms, rather than how is it being applied in modern tools, frameworks, stacks. Yeah, I feel like that should be like tested. But I realize I'm still kind of like thinking about how it would look like?
So like I would if I'm an interviewer, I wouldn't like beat about you're not able to produce the correct output. I would look at the way you explained the pseudocode that you wrote, or like the way you explained it to me. I think if that is in the right direction, I would give that point to you. That kind. I don't think it should be so rigid. Like the output has to be correct. If not, the system will mark you wrong and you are filtered.
Actually, that's a good point. So I want to kind of transition this into, like, let's say someone is just starting out their tech journey and they want to be interview ready. Do you recommend them going into lead code and drilling for this kind of questions, or how else do you recommend them to be more ready for these kind of interview questions?
So it depends. So there are some companies who do not ask you this algorithm questions. That they do exist. They will ask you to create an app. No algorithms involved. Data structures are involved, but no algorithms are involved. So depends what companies you want to join. Have that list. Look at the interview process. Check Glassdoor. They usually have what kind of questions they'll ask, and prepare accordingly. So if you want to get into Meta, for example, then yes, you need data structures and algorithms. They're citing their first round. But I wouldn't say like go crazy, only do lead code questions for 3 months. I think that's a bit, and of course if you're not liking it, don't do it. There are other companies you can join. You can still be a software developer, but you should be able to do the easy questions, because that is a test of your software development career, right? So
basically what I hear from you is, first, do your research. So make sure you know that what are the companies that you want to apply to are looking for, and you customize your learning method towards their interview questions. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is also basically find the company culture that fits you, right? So it's not about you having to work for this company. Of course you work for this company, but it's also if the company fits you, right? So it's like two-way process.
You're going to be spending like 9 hours in every single day in the company. We should always be looking at the companies a bit more
That's true.
strictly. Like, I mean, I do understand in today's day and age, it is a bit tough because a lot of companies seem to be firing and laying off like from news. But I think what is not shown in the news, that there are also companies hiring. I don't know why it's that way, right? On LinkedIn.
I think it's just clickbait, bro. Like seriously, it's more attractive to say that companies are all like retrenching, but there are so many companies.
There are so many companies actually. You don't even know their names
than
actually.
The big tech, I would say.
So I think that's where we should be looking at.
Yes,
the mid-tier company. I think that's the name for it.
I think when people think interviews, they keep gunning for like big tech. The Fang Mang. But actually there are so many other companies that are in need of people right now, and in need of like very specific roles as well, that we can all explore. But a lot of people don't know about it because that's not like, I also think that the majority of media out there where people, they start the interview process and then you click interview prep, almost all of it, it's about like, how do I apply to Mang? So I think that distorts people's perception and like restricts like their interview prep process. It also restricts like their job hunt process. So that's why I really appreciate that you brought that up. There are a lot of other companies that are hiring that have very different interview processes. A lot of them are very lean companies as well, so you have like the actual person on the feature team like interviewing you with very exact problems that relate to the position that they're opening up for. So they'll be asking questions like the more specific to feature, like, okay, so we're facing this problem now, we're scaling up to like 10 times more, this is our current like database, like what do you like recommend, how would you like solve this problem? And it's very specific to the feature, and you get to know how the company, the feature team's culture is like. You get to know what kind of problems will I be solving, and you get to apply them. So I do agree that different interview like methods out there depending on the company type, but people just need to be open to like that process of exploring and know that these exist.
That's really nice. I'm so glad, like this is very insightful so far. And I think just to add on, so we talk about data structures and algorithms and like understanding, doing research, finding customized like the company that fits you and all that. Now just moving on to like the resume part, right? So it's like the very first entry, right? Like how what makes a resume stand out? Like, I want to ask that, because at least in tech, people will always ask, do I need to build side projects and all that, right? What should I include in my resume? People often ask me that, and I just want to get your perspectives on this, because I think it's very important to first get your resume in, right? Because there's the first filter, that's the first gateway. The interview comes
I'll
later.
Be honest, I actually do not like to create resumes. I've been using the same resume forever. I just remove the bottom half, add the top, add a new job in with like a few bullet points. So my resume is really basic, but I do feel like I think we should stop making resumes at all and just rely on LinkedIn, because everything is already there. At least for mine, I just update it in there, and that should be the single point. And I also only look for jobs which are on LinkedIn. So like, you know that one-click jobs, like apply via LinkedIn. Just one click, and then my URL is sent to them. I'm like, that's the aim. Like, just keep clicking on those kind of jobs. So I don't even see the other jobs who are not on LinkedIn and who are collecting the paper resumes or something. So but of course I'm speaking from a point of privilege, because I was looking for jobs before the layoffs started happening. So at that point there were such companies. I don't know what's the situation now. But I actually do not think too much about like how my resume looks, as long as the last two jobs are there with a few bullet points of the achievements or like markers of what I brought in. So I don't dwell too much on how it looks like and what's side projects and stuff.
Because I guess you're speaking from the perspective of someone who's a senior engineer and who has job history.
Maybe yes.
Yeah. What if they're like university students or someone who's like trying to pivot into tech? Then what? Oh, do you?
I don't know if the resume matters much in that sense. It's usually what university, what degree. But of course nowadays degrees are not also very important. So I'm actually not sure. Sorry.
Well, I actually like I agree on like we shouldn't be using paper resumes anymore and go on LinkedIn, because like that's just like an easier way
and LinkedIn can
more
create
updated.
a resume for you as well, the paper resume.
So about that, like I agree, but in terms of like getting rid of that round of like looking at somebody's like either resume or LinkedIn, I do think that still needs to retain, but it's about like what are interviewers looking out for. So even for university students or like senior engineers, I think the resume is important for like the interviewer to look at and know what questions to ask. Like, oh, you had this job experience. Oh, you had this extracurricular. You built this side project. What did you learn from it? Or like, how did you implement this? And like beyond that, like how do you furnish your LinkedIn or resume more to include what you actually did, so that you can prompt the interviewer to ask like more specific questions? I think like one of the best tips I got from a friend who is a senior data scientist now, she basically said that every time she works on any project in a company, she records and documents the process and makes sure she also like talks about the value to the team. So every project she works on, she looks back at her LinkedIn or like resume and updates the bullet points under that like job. So that's something I'm also practicing as well, as much as possible, that every time I have a new change in job focus or like I have even more clarity over what I'm doing, I go back to like my LinkedIn and in the bullet points I update it, and I try to gear that towards like what value did I bring to the team, rather than just like dropping like stacks, this is what I used, but what was my function.
The impact.
So because like with this, and if you're continuously updating it becomes easier than like, oh, now I need to look for a job. Like, you know, going back to like always interview ready, always make sure your LinkedIn or resume is ready, right?
Actually, that reminds there is a specific round for this as well, where they just look at your resume and ask you questions of what you have written. So make sure what you write is important. You know everything about it. It's not just a fluke or like
exactly.
I used it like 10 years ago, so I wrote it in.
And it's also like like to give examples of how those bullet points can look like. You can talk about like it could just be like I was a backend engineer. If it's just that, it's just like, oh, okay. But if your bullet points was like I saw through the companies like when we scaled up to like from just 1,000 queries to now like 10,000. I was the one who implemented that solution, you know, moved and migrated us to the cloud to handle that sort of thing, you know. And then it gives like the interviewer that like insight to ask you like, oh, okay, so you actually seem to know about how a migration to the cloud and the benefits it provides. Like, can you talk more about that? Yeah, so that's kind of like how like that friend gave me insight into how I should structure the LinkedIn and resume or whatever. And I think that's a good practice to have. For university students though, like I would say like focus on what you've done already. Like even in classes, if you're doing like small little projects, think about how would I reflect this in a resume. And don't be ashamed to put that out. Even if it's just like, you know, a 7-day like project on building like some machine learning model. Yeah, write about that. Yeah, I think a lot of people are afraid and they're like, oh, this is so small and tiny.
Yeah, it's actually not small.
It's not.
Quite a big thing.
Exactly. Just be confident and know that I have grown. Have you grown through the process? Yeah. So what? How did you grow? What were the problems you faced? Like, you should be proud of yourself first, so that you dare to put that on like the resume. You know.
Yeah, I think it's really good, like what you mentioned, the point about being specific. So not just writing your role, but adding that specific description, and also the best practice of always recording what you're learning, right? Another point I like to add is about like customizing the resume for the company, because you know how like we talk about, you know, doing research about the company to, you know, understand what kind of interview questions they'll ask. So the same thing for resume. Like at least for me, my process of doing my resume is I would kind of customize it to fit each company.
Like for example, you are a software developer, but you can do web development and you can do mobile development.
Yes, thanks.
So then you highlight the mobile part in one resume, you highlight the web part in another resume.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by customizing the resume. Because I know when I was like applying to many tech jobs, there's web developer, there's mobile developer, and there's one that's looking more for JavaScript, there's one for Java. Like, you know, so you will have to intentionally highlight those. And also highlight those achievements if you have any side projects built. I literally have an example where I have before interviewed at this company, and this company asked me about my side project, like all of them, because they find it interesting. I'll like add a small descriptions on like my little projects, you know, and then they'll be like, oh, actually this is very interesting, can you tell me more about it? You know, how you build it, you know, what's the process like, what did you learn from it? So in a way, the companies, they're getting to know you as a person, you know. You're not just another engineer, like another tech person applying. It's about really customizing it and also showcasing your personality in that resume to stand out. Yeah, that's personally how I kind of do it.
Okay, so I think today we like talked about a lot of different tips around interview prep. So like software development, interview prep, and some can be applied to even other roles as well. And sorry.
Do you want to wrap up?
Can you?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, oh my God, this has been a session that I think it just keeps flowing. Like we have a lot, like based on our experience, based on our friends and anecdotes and everything. So I think it's been quite an insightful experience. Definitely, I enjoyed like learning more from your perspectives on this. So we hope that, you know, this episode will be helpful to some people watching as well.
I think it will.
I think
And we would like to hear like your comments about what you think about what we thought about the DSA rounds, the resume tips. If you have some resume tips that you can share with our audience as well, that would be great.
Yes, please put it in the comments.
Yeah.
I think it's really good to share this information around. So yes, thanks so much for watching today's Ragtag episode. This has been Ragtag. See you next episode.
Remember to like, subscribe,
follow us on our socials.
comment, like wherever, like we're everywhere as much as possible. Or if we're not everywhere, like tell us where to be. But as always, like thank you for watching,
Thank you for watching.
see you for the next episode.